All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy Football Tonight. Of course, I'm here with the co-host of the evening, Jared Eisenlohr, and we're going to be talking about some fantasy football from Week 7. Some highlights, how did we do, what's happening around the league, and I like to always start off with a little bit of studs of the week and duds of the week, but before we even get rolling there, Jared, how you doing, man? What's happening?
I'm good, man. Good Lions win. Weird fantasy week. I thought it was going to be a terrible week. As we talked about this morning, I was at the game on Sunday, so you don't really pay attention a lot to the fantasy landscape outside of the game you're at, but scores were super low. Like, man, I must have had a really bad week, and then it turns out everybody had a bad week score-wise, and it ended up being too bad. So, you never know what you're going to get, but yeah, kind of a weird week. I know we'll get into a lot of the injuries and the impacts of that here in a little bit, but yeah, as we said in the first show, what matters most is getting the Lions win.
Absolutely. Would you do us a favor and just see if your mic volume is up? So it is a little low. There we go.
Is that better?
Oh, that's way too hot. Turn it down just a little.
How about that?
There we go. I
Check.
can adjust you a little bit, but not much. All right. Should be better. Just want to make sure it's not distorted. So yeah, wild week, low scoring week. And I don't even think that there was there not one player that scored above 20 points this week?
Depends on your scoring system.
True.
But non-quarterback, there's got to be somebody.
I thought it was trending that way for the longest, that, in your standard leagues. Fantasy football studs and duds of the week. This is a list that we like to do each week here. Talk about a few guys that, they stood out above the rest, or maybe they probably should have just never got off the bus. Let's start with Russell Wilson. This was an intriguing one for me. I was very surprised that Mike Tomlin was making this move, but he obviously knew something more than the rest of us, right? He's had an opportunity to evaluate Wilson and Fields. And for all of the flack that Mike Tomlin took on social media last week, and even before that, because this move was almost expected, it seemed like, but the switch from him to Justin Fields paid off after taking a quarter to kind of get through, his rhythm, or at least find his rhythm in the passing game. Russell Wilson finished with 16 of 29, 264 yards. I mean, terrible completion rate, but 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, and even chipped in a quarterback sneak for a touchdown. I mean, not a bad game for his first game back. Pretty impressive that, all of that success came against the New York Jets. Pretty tough defense. So that defense usually only allows 165 yards or less per game in the passing game. And Wilson, he's going to be squaring off against the New York Giants this week. And, I mean, the Giants are in some trouble right now. This should be an opportunity for Russell Wilson to have another big week, potentially. Any thoughts on Wilson?
You didn't know what you were going to get. I think certainly a better passer, but not as mobile. Probably not going to make a lot of plays when the play breaks down. Not going to get as much on the rushing yards front. Nice to get the rushing touchdown. I think probably need a bigger sample size than 1 week. But so far, Russ didn't look cooked as far as Week 7 goes.
Brent DeWitt, I'm not sure what you mean by that. What did I guarantee this morning? I'm not sure what I guaranteed this morning on the morning show, but yeah, enlighten me. Kirk Cousins is my dud of the week. Kirk Cousins, he had an epic performance in Week 5 against Tampa Bay nonetheless. I mean, that's a tough defense. But his statistics are underwhelming since then, especially in matchups that maybe you would think that she should be able to exploit. Cousins completed 24 of 35 on Sunday against Seattle. 232 yards and a passing, 232 yards passing and a touchdown to Drake London, and then tossed 2 more interceptions in the process. Cousins' 7 interceptions are tied for second most in the league. in the early going of the season. Now, Atlanta's coming up on a pretty favorable schedule. Should give Cousins a little bit of an opportunity to bounce back. They square off against Tampa Bay, which their defense, like I just said a minute ago, is a pretty stingy defense. Has also been a little leaky as of late. So then they host Dallas, and then they travel to New Orleans, and we know that the Saints are in a bit of trouble right now. Cousins' 242 passing attempts are the third highest in the league, a trend that is expected to continue. What do you think about Cousins, prior to Week 8 and moving forward?
You're going to get the peaks and the valleys with Cousins. We talked about this a little bit. He's got no shortage of weapons, certainly with Pitts and then two great receivers, a great running game. But you're going to be susceptible to these weeks. I think these weeks are going to be more common than the 500 yards weeks from Cousins. It's just not the way they're built. They've got a decent running game. They play decent defense, really. They're in a weak division. You're not going to have a lot of 500-yard opportunities with Cousins. Maybe you didn't expect it to bounce back this far in the last 2 weeks, but overall, I think Cousins is what he is. He's a backup quarterback that should be on your bench and is able to step in if there's a bye week or an injury. That's really what he is.
Makes sense. For the running backs, the biggest stud should be no surprise to Jahmyr Gibbs.
Currently, we definitely had a lot of 20-point scorers, by the way, because I'm thinking Jahmyr Gibbs, Javonte Williams. Like, I'm thinking of a couple now that come to my head. You froze me there when you said that, but there's definitely a few that cross 20 points. Non-quarterbacks that cross 20 points.
So Jahmyr Gibbs, currently the top producer at the position on the week. Jahmyr Gibbs made the most of his 19 touches, rushing for 116 yards, 7.7 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns on 15 carries, and adding 4 receptions for 44 yards. Now, his counterpart, Knuckles, David Montgomery, suffered a lower leg injury midway through the first half, causing Gibbs to inherently take on more touches, and for good reason. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs is trusted in that situation. So given the level of success Gibbs has demonstrated, he's finally starting to come out of his shell. Last season through week 4, he was still trying to find himself. And for whatever reason this year, it's more of like the split carries between him and David. I feel like he really hasn't busted out yet. But this was a game where I feel like Gibbs finally kind of busted out. And now he's developing that confidence. So I'm looking for more out of Gibbs here over the next several weeks. But the question is the 50-50 split. How much of that is going to limit, his fantasy value? Definitely a stud for the week, but that's my question to you, Jared, is where do you see Gibbs and this whole Gibbs and Montgomery situation? I mean, do you start them both? If you don't have them on, both on the same league, or what do you do here?
I don't think many are going to have them on the same team, right? I think that would be an interesting strategy if you did. Gibbs is your high floor. He's going to deliver every week. Like he's going to deliver something because he is so active in the passing game. He scored 2 touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 weeks. He scored a touchdown in all but I think the Tampa game and surprisingly
Arizona.
He scored a receiving touchdown in Arizona.
Yes.
And then, but he surprisingly didn't score at Dallas. I don't think.
I don't believe so. No, I don't. I think you're right.
Yeah. So like he's going to score touchdowns. He's going to catch, 3 to 5 balls typically about every week, especially like with JMO news. He's going to be fine. I think even his low weeks, I'm going to go back to his game log. If we want to use, let's use Tampa. He had 8 + 7 catches, 15 points, PPR points. Like 15 points is like you can just lock and load him for 15. And then you're going to have the games where he's going to top 30 like he did here this past week against Minnesota. So there is nothing to be concerned about with David Montgomery and Gibbs. If you did have them both, you probably could play them both.
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
Above average points.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. So if you did start Jahmyr, if you had them both, Like just in the Minnesota game, even with David Montgomery going out early, that was a 40-point, game for two backs. Against Dallas, that would have been, a 33-point game for two backs, which maybe isn't the greatest. Against Seattle, you're looking at about 36 points between the two backs. So
Gibbs had 2 touchdowns against Seattle. I mean, yeah, he was money there.
yeah.
Gibbs is by far, if I'm looking at dynasty running backs or even season long for that matter, it's really hard to name a running back that I could definitively say I wanted more than Jahmyr Gibbs.
His future is so bright, man. So
even
bright.
this year, Bijan, I mean, about the same. Derrick Henry maybe this year he might set the record for rushing in a season. But I mean, Breece Hall has been somewhat of a letdown. McCaffrey hasn't seen the field yet. Gibbs is right there, the top tier of running backs for fantasy football.
Well, this next guy is probably going to come as a surprise, and that's Alvin Kamara. He's my dud of the week, but I'm not going to say it's all his fault. Now, New Orleans was a little short-staffed during their Thursday night contest against Denver, and to say that's putting it mildly. Without both of their top receivers, right? No Chris Olave, no Rashid Shaheed, quarterback Derek Carr, and multiple members of their offensive line all absent. The Denver Broncos were able to shut down Alvin Kamara pretty easily, loading up the box with defenders. Now, he was visibly upset at halftime after several check down hospital balls, they like to call them, were thrown his way by Spencer Rattler. I mean, Spencer was hanging him out to dry, and his attitude didn't appear much better after the game's conclusion. So it wasn't Kamara's fault. I mean, he didn't have a team around him. But now at 2-5, right, with a significant uphill battle to kind of remain in contention for a wild card spot, the biggest question is Kamara on a short list right now to potentially be moved as the Saints are facing an uphill battle with cap space too, for next season. So that is one opportunity that I'll have my ear to the ground, trying to pay attention to what's going on with Kamara. But what do you think here? Do you think that there's an opportunity for a move?
I don't know. If you're the Saints, certainly you would think it's something you're interested in, depending on how long Derek Carr is going to be out and some of the other injuries that you've got. I mean, after 2 weeks, we were saying the Saints were the favorite to win the NFC, right?
Yeah.
Some were. We weren't, but some were after 2 blowout wins against the Panthers and the Cowboys, which has proven not as impressive. So I think the Saints are in trouble this year, especially with where the NFC North is, and I can't see them catching both Atlanta and Tampa Bay. So I think they're going to be on the outside looking into the playoffs. If you've got a lot of cap space that you need to clear out, that would be an opportunity. But you got to remember that real life football and fantasy football tend to sometimes run opposite one another. So things aren't going really well for Kamara right now in New Orleans. If he is moved, right, bad for the Saints. But if you're a Kamara owner and he lands somewhere like Dallas, I'm just throwing a name. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. But if he lands in Dallas or something like that, where the offense is a bit more respectable, then he actually might see a pretty big upgrade from where you're at. So tough week for Kamara, but I think you nailed it. It was going to be hard for anybody to be successful with what the Saints are rolling out there on Thursday night.
So even with this extension, that the Saints and Alvin Kamara got done today, I think it was like $24.5 million or something like that. The question still remains, is that a move to get a deal done to get him moved? Or because I don't know how that's going to help their salary cap situation. They're in cap purgatory in 25. They're going to be in a big time problem. And Carr, so here's another issue for Derek Carr, right? He's supposed to come back in week 9, but he has an oblique injury. And an oblique injury, we've seen these for other players. It doesn't take much to re-injure an oblique injury. that especially for a quarterback. So who knows if he's going to be up or down each week.
So I hadn't seen this. So when you just said that, I hadn't seen the news on Alvin Kamara. So this was just signed today.
Yeah. Like a few hours ago.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't seen this.
So my thought was, sometimes when you go to move a player, they'll do an extension preemptively to say, all right, now you know what he's under contract for the next couple of years, or he's staying. I found that a bit interesting, though. After a real crappy game, and he's pissed off that they do an extension.
I would not think they would do, my opinion, and I can be wrong, they would not have, the Saints wouldn't have done the extension if they were going to trade him. The other team would have negotiated that extension, not the Saints. So I think that means he's staying.
Interesting.
I think that means he's going to be a Saint for 2-year extent, probably the rest of his career.
Yeah, probably. Well, whether it's a sign and trade or a sign and stay, Alvin Kamara is going to need some help to get back on track here, as his team.
Yeah, I just think if it was a sign and trade, the trade partner would be already out there because they would have done they would have negotiated the deal more or less. So, but interesting. I hadn't heard that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, he needs some help. All right, the next stud of the day or the week, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and no, this is not just super biased because I'm a Lions fan, but. Tip of the cap to several rookie options this week, at the position, most notably Brian Thomas Jr. and Keon Coleman, but it was Amon-Ra St. Brown who stole the show on Sunday. Yet another solid start for his season. The Sun God finished with 25 PPR points for his best showing of the year so far. The focal point of Detroit's passing attack, St. Brown currently ranks as the overall wide receiver 6 on the young season. His latest effort, on 8 targets, he was 8 for 112 and 1 on the day. 1 touchdown marks the 4th consecutive game in which he has caught a TD. And even with the rise of Jameson Williams and now the crash and burn of Jameson Williams, St. Brown has routinely finished as a top flight wide receiver 1 option for many fantasy managers each week. And his very high floor makes him an appealing option to consider in DFS games. The Lions have several challenging contests upcoming, noted above, in talking about Jahmyr Gibbs against Tennessee, who yields the 3rd fewest passing yards each week at 166. This Tennessee defense is it's going to be a problem. I know a lot of fans are thinking this is going to be an easy game, a walk in the park. I don't believe it's going to be for the Lions. I really don't, but we should probably temper our expectations a little bit on Amon-Ra St. Brown this weekend. Anything you want to add here to Amon-Ra St. Brown? I mean, the dude is an absolute stud. I mean, week in, week out, the guy just gets it done.
I don't know what you can add. He kind of falls with the Jahmyr Gibbs. You know what you're going to get. It's very rare you don't get it. But yeah, I agree with you on the Tennessee game. I think this is for a couple of reasons. I think this is one that I'm not necessarily feeling great about. I think there's maybe a different topic, but I think there's some concerns, not necessarily scheme wise, but just where it sits in the schedule. You're coming off a 2 big road wins. You got another one on deck. You got the distractions now with JMO. You got a team that's desperate for a win. It gives me a little bit of anxiety thinking about Sunday, if I'm being honest.
Trapdoor, right?
Yep.
So the dud of the week, Malik Neighbors, not a name that I expected to throw out, during this season. He's had a hell of a season so far, but after missing weeks 5 and 6 with a concussion, Malik Neighbors finally returned for this week's contest against the Philadelphia Eagles. And he finished with 4 receptions, 41 yards on 8 targets, and was still the preferred go-to option for Daniel Jones when afforded the opportunity. Under constant duress the entire game, Jones had no time to allow for downfield plays to develop and was forced to constantly check down to Wan'Dale Robinson instead. Now, the loss of their left tackle, Andrew Thomas, for the season is a pretty big one. And I think it does affect the offense as a whole. It will affect the passing game because Daniel Jones is not going to have enough time to be able to, navigate, the deeper shots. So I think with everything included here, with what's going on with the Giants, Malik Neighbors, obviously my dud of the week, only because of his performance, but moving forward, his impact, on the season may be limited unless the Giants can figure out what they're going to do on the left side of their offense. Anything you want to add there?
Just rookie wide receivers, there's not a lot of tape on them. They come in, they make a splash. We've seen this before. Teams adjust, and now they have to adjust again, right? And so I think right now we're just seeing that lull with Malik Neighbors. Volume should be there. Daniel Jones is just not a very good quarterback. I mean, he's going to be limited for a while until they figure out a better option there. But I think you're going to see a few of these weeks on Malik Neighbors as teams start to, have more time to game plan against him. But he took the league by storm. There's no doubt the first 3-4 weeks, but he has to now adjust to these defenses, giving him different looks.
Yeah. Last stud and dud is David Njoku, and the dud is Travis Kelce. So it turns out that David Njoku needed to break out. It turns out all that David Njoku needed to break out was the loss of Deshaun Watson for the season. Who knew? Finally, it afforded a sharp rise in targets. He had 14 targets on the day. He finished with 10 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown, finished with 23.6 PPR points. And like many others, I don't wish Watson any ill will or, injury or any of that stuff. But Cleveland is such a better team without him under center. I don't think that anyone is going to cry over spilled milk here. It may have saved the Browns. I don't know. Travis Kelce. It is difficult to point out the duds at this position due to the variety of thinness across the entire tight end industry in this NFL. It has been terrible this season. But Travis Kelce indeed came up short on Sunday. After two promising outings in week 4 and 5, he was heavily featured. In both of those outings, the Chiefs quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, could only connect with the future Hall of Famer 4 times on Sunday for 17 yards against a very stout San Francisco 49ers defense, of course. It just wasn't his day. Already extremely thin at wide receiver, though, heading into this contest, you would have expected Travis Kelce to have a little bit more of upside in this game. And then Juju Smith-Schuster suffered a setback with his hamstring, and rookie Xavier Worthy missed some time and needed medical evaluation. Kansas City's offense should continue to funnel targets to Kelce at a high rate, so I consider this more of a blip on the radar than anything else. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'm not a Kelce fan for this year. I wasn't last year either, actually, just to be honest, and he proved me wrong. But I have not been on Kelce now for a couple years, and we talked about this earlier this season. I think there's just a lot of other things going on in Travis Kelce's life. Doesn't mean he's not dedicated to the Chiefs. Doesn't mean he's not talented. I'm not saying that. He's 34 years old now, I think. The human body at that position, what it's required as a tight end in the NFL, can only take so much. And I think we're seeing some of that wear and tear now. And I think he's lost a step. Doesn't mean he's not still a great tight end. It doesn't mean that he's not going to be a future Hall of Famer. It doesn't mean he can't break out, but break out and have a game like he had a couple weeks ago. But all in all, Kelce is a backup tight end right now. That's really what he is for fantasy. And he probably will be for the rest of the season.
I agree. So let's get into the bigger, better segment of the week here. Let's go through some of your hits and misses and what Jared sees in the purview of fantasy football coming up here for week 8.
First things first, we've talked about it. It's been a theme. Injuries. It's been a tough week for injuries, particularly at the wide receiver positions. We had Mike Evans and Godwin last night. Mike Evans should not have been playing, I don't think. But then also Brandon Ayuk, DK Metcalf, Juju Smith-Schuster, Deebo Samuel has pneumonia, apparently.
Yeah, what's up with all that, man?
Jamison Williams is now suspended for 2 games. It's no doubt going to be an impactful week for a lot of fantasy teams, and likely an active week on the waiver wire. When we have these injuries, though, they present opportunities for other players also. Other players that are likely already on our roster. So you've got Evans and Godwin is likely going to have a positive impact for Kate Otten, Jalen McMillan, as well as Rashad White as a receiving back, I would say might have a positive impact. The Brandon Ayuk absence, and who knows how long Debo is going to be out, is likely going to mean an accelerated timeline for Ricky Pearsall. You still got Juwan Jennings. If DK Metcalf misses time, it's going to help JSN. JMO missing will likely benefit Laporta, maybe Gibbs, maybe Khalif Raymond is a legitimate streamer for a couple weeks. So even though we have these injuries, if you happen to be impacted by them, there's ways to navigate them. If you were lucky enough to not be impacted by them, there are still ways in which you can almost play a little bit of offense in keeping some of these players out of the opponent's hands that desperately need them. So you got to think a little bit of chess on some of these things. As far as last week, we really nailed the guys to avoid. So we had Jamison Williams. In fact, I sat him in our Rocked On Cancer Foundation League. Sat him for Jordan Whittington, who got hurt early in the game, but we knew to stay off of Jamison Williams. We did sit Brandon Ayuk, didn't like the matchup. Of course, he got injured, and then we were also off of Travis Kelce. All turned in very bad performances. But we also hit on some of the let's get wild plays. Jonnu Smith, Tyler Goodson, all of our cash running backs were studs. Kyron Williams, Kenneth Walker, Bijan Robinson, such as to be expected. The wide receivers in general were misses, however. So Juju and Whittington was injury related. But nothing you can do about that. But JSN and Ridley overall last week were busts, and we were pretty high on them from last week's show. I did expect both Andy Dalton and Matthew Stafford to do a little bit more against bad defenses, but they both turned in pretty terrible performances. So we had advised the listeners last week to maybe look at them for both GPP and cash lineups. Neither one of them panned out. So that was unfortunate in some of the misses. Overall, going back to the way we score these, if things turned out the way we had expected, we give it a yes. If things went wildly wrong, we mark it red and say, hey, that didn't go well. And then there are some that are fairly neutral. It turned in moderate to above average performances, but certainly didn't take the top off of anything. So we were 18, 13, and 3 from last week. So an improvement over the week before. The big hits on the quarterbacks were Geno Smith, Jordan Love, Sam Darnold. Running backs we talked about already. Receivers, we had Amon-Ra, Amari Cooper. And then for tight ends, we had Njoku and Kittle, Ertz, and Noah Fant, who all turned in pretty good performances. The rest of the misses we talked about Stafford and Dalton. We had Austin Eckler. He didn't do much. Emmanuel Wilson on a let's get wild play. Didn't turn in anything. Juju and Whittington got hurt. We talked about. We had a couple of long shots on Noah Brown and Jalen Coker. Both just had one catch. Again, we knew it was a long shot, but we gave it a shot. Cash games, Colby Parkinson did not play well, nor did Grant Calcaterra. So all in all, decent week, better than the week before. But again, just one of those challenging weeks for fantasy football. All in all, on the year, we're still much more positive than we are down.
Very, very, very difficult week this week. And you mentioned Andy Dalton in there a couple of times, and he escapes injury on the field, and then he's involved in a car accident with his family today, just as a couple hours ago.
You told me that.
Yeah, I don't get.
I had no idea.
I don't get what's going on here in the NFL, man. It's like these players are just. There's so many injuries, and the rest of the news here. I didn't mean to leave you guys there on a cliffhanger. Andy Dalton seems to be okay. None of his family or himself required emergency treatment. Now, he was undergoing evaluation by the team medical personnel, but at this time, it does appear that everybody seems to be okay. Best wishes to Dalton and his family. That's got to be a scary situation. So, I mean, what's on deck for this week, I guess is the biggest question. The sample size, like I say, every week, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, we are almost halfway through the season. We're entering week 8.
The sample size gets bigger, but the pool of players that are healthy, that are taking the field, is getting smaller. And so every week it feels like we've got less to deal with, and then you throw in the bye weeks, and this is where this is where it gets fun. This is where, the first few weeks, it's the draft. Everybody can go into a draft and draft a team, but now it becomes more of how are we going to manage this team? How are we going to mitigate the risks that we have? How are we going to figure out which players are crucial to the stretch run and make sure we've got backups, whether it's their handcuff, their backup, or someone else, or depth on the roster that's going to be able to sustain now down the stretch. So one thing to remember is the fantasy football season would typically run through, I think, through week 14, with week 15, 16, and 17 being the playoffs. Nothing in week 18 is typically used for fantasy football. Very few leagues will do that. So we are now well past the midway point of, we are just past the midway point of the regular season. So this is the back half of the regular season starting this week.
You blink and it's, I swear, this happens every year. It's like we wait so long, it seems like, for football to come back, and then it's like we are 3-4 weeks away from opening, night of just the preseason, and then it comes, and then next thing you know, it's holy cow, it's week 8. Mm-hmm. It flies, and I dislike that the season flies, but that just means that I'm getting older quicker. So neither of them's fine with me.
Yeah, and then the second half of February, March, and the first half of April are just a drag.
Yeah, they're brutal. They're brutal. Unless you're in Florida, they're brutal.
We've got to enjoy it while it's here. We got to enjoy it while it's here.
That's right.
So a couple things I see is just trending up and trending down for this week. I think we'll start with the trending downs. I think Baker Mayfield lost a couple of big weapons here. I think there's capable people to step in, but I think overall the 350-yard, 3-touchdown games for Baker Mayfield probably going to be fewer and far between. Christian Kirk, the emergence of Brian Thomas, Evan Ingram coming back, just the struggles of Jacksonville in general have Christian Kirk diminishing a little bit. Raheem Mostert, he's an older running back. The Dolphins are struggling. TUES should be back this week, which could help, but Achan's going to be the firm lead back, and I think they're really liking what they're seeing from Jalen Wright as well. So I don't see Mostert, being heavily used down the stretch. Could be wrong, but I think he's otherwise trending down. I think Nick Chubb too. I think if you're a Nick Chubb owner, if you're like me and you stashed him and you put him on IR and thinking that he was going to be this big resurgence here halfway through the season, I think just in light of the state of the Browns, I don't think it's going to happen. And it was a good shot. It was a good thing to think about. You played it right. But if you've got Nick Chubb, now that he's back, I think it might be a good time to sell on him, because there might even be a time where they say, hey, you know what, this isn't worth it. Let's shut him down. Make sure that he's fully restored and healthy for next year. So that's one trending down. The last one I've got, Najee Harris. Jaylen Warren is back. In fact, Jaylen Warren, 51% to 49% on snap share to Najee Harris. I think they're going to work Jaylen Warren back into it. Najee Harris isn't going to disappear, but I think the high volume games for him are going to be over as long as Jaylen Warren is healthy.
I think it all makes perfect sense. Trending up, you got a surprising one there. For the first one, Rashad Bateman.
I tell you, Rashad Bateman, he's run as many routes as Zay Flowers. He was somebody they were really high on when he came out. and didn't quite pan out. He had a rougher start to his career, but he's really turned in some good performances. This offense for Baltimore is pretty phenomenal, right? And Lamar Jackson is playing at MVP level. Rashad Bateman right now is a clear-cut number 2 option in the passing game over Mark Andrews. So I think I like Bateman and where he's going. Devon Achane, we talked about him a few minutes ago. He obviously plays a lot better when Tua is the starting quarterback. He has played the toughest run defensive schedule so far in the early part of his schedule. The next 5 weeks is near the easiest schedule in terms of run defenses. So get in now on Devon Achane. I put a couple trade offers out to people in various dynasty leagues to try to get Devon Achane on my team now. I think Kate Otten is going to be trending up. He's already led the Buccaneers in route percentage for week 7. So he ran more routes than anybody for the Bucs. And now there's 2 wide receiver targets that have to get spread around. I think Kate Otten is going to be the recipient of a lot of those. I don't think there's going to be that many targets to go around with Jalen McMillan or Sterling Shepard. And we don't know how long Evans is out, but it didn't look like he was going to be back next week, if you ask me. Hunter Henry, 80% route share, second most on the Patriots. They're much more capable of throwing the ball now with Drake May. He's looked competent and able to get the ball down the field. So I think that speaks well for Hunter Henry. And then Ricky Pearsall. So he led all 49ers in routes this past weekend. A lot of it was attrition with Debo and with Brandon Ayuk going down. But you got to remember, he's a first-round draft pick, Ricky Pearsall is. And so he's now kind of stepping into this role. They liked him enough to take him in the first round. I think you're going to see him join up with Jawan Jennings for a few weeks here on the receiving end of Brock Purdy passes. And then last but not least, the IR returners who should be squaring off together on Thursday night, I believe, in Cooper Kupp and TJ Hawkinson.
I'm just glad to see Ricky Pearsall back. And, after that whole thing that went down, glad to see him back.
Second year in a row where we've had a rookie involved in a shooting.
It's crazy.
The season started.
It's
and
nuts.
Both have gone. Well, at least we don't know about Ricky Pearsall. He had a good week last week, or a decent week last week. But Brian Robinson seems to be doing really well, so we're happy to see that.
Yeah. Man, I just lost something I had up, but there was some stats that came out talking about tight ends, and I'll have to find it. Maybe I'll find it for next week. But any questions from the chat? So let me double check here and see if we have any questions or statements. Cooper Kupp is on the trade block. That is correct. There's been some conversation about it earlier today. As far as the Detroit Lions go, the story is it's probably Darius Smith that makes the most sense here. I know that there's been a lot of things pumping out there, Myles Garrett or which is the most recent one he keeps popping up, or Crosby. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on, that are being said, but I think Darius Smith is the one that makes the most sense. Ben Johnson making adjustments. Lions made on the final drive versus the Vikings with Goff under center. I think they have much more success when he's under center, sets up play action better. Yeah, except when he's under constant duress like he was in that game. He was under duress about 52.7% of his dropbacks, which is quite a bit. I don't really see any big time questions for fantasy football in here. Blue Jay says he traded Jacobs for DJ Moore plus a mid-round pick in a 3-team keeper. He has Kamara, Hunt, Hubbard, Bigsby at running back. He needed a wide receiver bad, went through the league. That's the best I could get.
DJ Moore and change for Jacobs.
Yep.
Keeper league.
3-team keeper.
3-team keeper.
Yeah, he says a mid-round pick and a 3-team keeper.
I'm guessing it's a 3-player keeper.
Maybe that's what he meant.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In these keeper leagues or these dynasty leagues, I mean, receivers and contributors outside, like receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, tend to be a bit more valuable because you're gonna get more years out of them. Running backs shelf life just isn't more than 4 or 5 years. And so if you get a running back who's entering that mid to late 20s part of their career, it doesn't hurt you to unload them and get to a position where you're going to get a few more years of value out of it. So
yeah,
without knowing all the different details, it seems pretty fair.
So Casey says, rumor that the Lions are talking to the Browns. Doubt that Holmes will trade Hendon Hooker. Is that the new rumor that we're now trading Hendon Hooker to the Browns because Deshaun Watson's down?
Haven't heard it. Interesting.
I don't think so.
I don't know all the details of it, but if they've got something we want and we've got something they want, they make it happen. But we would then have a pretty big gap in terms of our backup. We're not just going to find a backup laying around at this point, unless you're bringing in somebody completely new.
So Eric Rintamaki, he had a question, but Eric, you are forbidden from getting advice. You I haven't won at all this year, so you're forbidden from getting advice. I'm just kidding. I have no clue about playing Prescott or Darnold this week. I mean, pick your poison. I think Darnold would be a bad shot because of the hangover that the Lions tend to leave, and they're on a short 4-day work week here. They got to turn right around and play on Thursday, so I'd go Dak Prescott personally. But if you're playing me, put in Darnold.
Yeah, I think Dak Prescott would be where I would go this week. If nothing else, I wouldn't. It's pretty close, honestly. Like, it's close. The Rams aren't going to be anything difficult, but to your point, it's a short week. It's a travel week. The other thing too is you got to remember that McVay and O'Connell know each other pretty well.
Yeah.
So there could be that dynamic that goes into how they scheme against Sam Darnold. So I would probably lean Prescott and hope that it's a high scoring. They're not going to run on the 49ers, so they got to do something. So I would probably lean towards Prescott.
All right, week 8 waiver targets.
There's a lot. There's a lot. So if you're in need of a quarterback, I'm looking at Tua, Herbert, and Russell Wilson. Let's see what happens. Running backs, Jalen Warren is below the 25% owned threshold in most leagues. Kamani Vidal, Tyler Goodson. We'll go back to the well on that one. Justice Hill and Ray Davis. Justice Hill has standalone value outside of Derrick Henry. In fact, I think he had outrushed Derrick Henry in the first half yesterday. Wide receivers. You're going to have to go after Jalen McMillan. I would add Sterling Shepard in there too for Tampa Bay. For the departure of Amari Cooper, I would look at Cedric Tillman in Cleveland. I think the 49ers are going to be a combination of a Jawan Jennings, a Jacob Cowing, and like what we talked about with Ricky Pearsall. Troy Franklin is still out there as well. So he and Bo Nix, we talked about last week or the week before, college teammates. They seem to be building up some chemistry. In fact, so much so that I think Cortland Sutton is on the trade block for Denver as well right now, which if he ends up getting moved, and there's rumors that he might get moved to the 49ers actually, then Troy Franklin would step up and have a pretty prominent role and has that built-in chemistry with Bo Nix. And so it might be a week too early, but I would think about grabbing Troy Franklin. And then tight ends, Cade Otton, if he's out there, he has the opportunity to be one of the top tight ends week over week right now. Hunter Henry showing good rapport with Drake May. And if DK is out, Noah Fant looks like somebody you might want to look at if he's on the waiver wire as well.
Yeah, you mentioned more tight ends, and I was trying to find that article again. There was some really good information that I snagged on this article, and I can't remember any of it. So tell me about this Kamani Vidal, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I don't know anything about this guy. I mean, he's a Los Angeles Charger. He's a running back. He's not rostered really at all. Why Kamani?
Yeah, I think when we went into the season, there was the debate between J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, and I think everybody was leaning towards it being more of a Gus Edwards type of backfield as the lead, and that J.K. Dobbins would come along slowly. It was actually more of the inverse, where J.K. Dobbins has started off fast, and Gus Edwards hasn't really taken off. And so when you look at what's the upside in a Chargers offense that wants to run the ball, if you're not getting things from either Gus Edwards or J.K. Dobbins right now, it's going to be, people are going to get their opportunities. And I think in a Jim Harbaugh offense, you're going to have a lot of people running the ball. And so it's kind of an upside play where when he has a breakout game, it's going to be too late. Everybody's going to be clamoring for him, and your chances of getting your hands on him are going to be much smaller. So I would always like to sit here and try to lean in, be a week early, and see what happens. But he didn't touch the ball much the first part of the year. I don't think he had a carry or any sort of stats the whole first month. But he's been getting a handful of carries the last 2 weeks. He's caught a couple balls. I think it was 2 weeks ago against Denver. He had like a 38-yard touchdown catch. So he's getting into the offense a little bit. Now, he didn't put up much against Arizona, but I get you're going to have those ups and downs. So I think just looking at what's the upside, you're not getting much from J.K. Dobbins. And so that the Chargers are going to try to run the football. So that's where our Kamani Vidal's appeal is to me.
All right. I love it. I love the answer. There was one question in here. Would you trade CeeDee Lamb and Javonte Williams? He doesn't have importance in his team, so he says, for Drake London and Puka Nacua. 10-man PPR league. Depth is Brian Thomas and Devonta Smith and CD. Interesting. So trading CeeDee Lamb and Javonte Williams for Puka Nacua, who's now coming back off IR. Hey, Drake London, excuse me, in a 10-man PPR league.
No, I don't do that trade. I think selling low on CeeDee Lamb is not going to be the best bet. We don't know what Puka is coming off this injury. We don't know who his quarterback for sure is going to be. There's talk that Stafford's getting dealt with the Vikings potentially. Like the Rams are not going anywhere, right? And so again, I don't know if there could be a fire sale in LA with the Rams. We don't know where Cooper Kupp's going to be. So is Puka Nacua as good as the featured number one without Cooper Kupp there? I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. And I think keeping CeeDee Lamb, who's the best player in this trade by far, is probably the best bet, in my opinion on that.
Makes sense. Could you imagine Matthew Stafford in purple?
That's what they're saying.
And
they're saying it's possible. Minnesota's trying to get him.
And even worse than that, that dude would probably take him to the Super Bowl.
Well, they play each other on Thursday night.
Yeah. I don't like the idea of Matthew Stafford having Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones and
Hawkinson again.
And pretty good
and a running game. Yeah, good defense.
Good bookends. Extremely good defense. Yep. You're putting him right back in a Rams situation when he joined the Rams.
Yep.
And they're at the top of the NFC North, which means he doesn't have much work to do. He just has to keep the ship sailing forward.
Turnover prone. however.
Yeah.
Um,
I think he's getting
but
smarter with his age. I just feel like, yeah, there's been some mistakes that have been made. I think Stafford, man, he tries to push the ball. He takes risks. I don't know how many risks he's going to have to take with Justin Jefferson.
it's true. It's true.
Throw
So,
it up,
yeah,
go get it.
I hope it does not come to fruition. I don't want to see
Yeah.
Stafford in the division.
No, I don't either. All right, so what are our targets here? We got week 8 DFS targets, and then we got the Rockdown Fantasy League update.
All right, yeah. Let's start with let's go to the Rockdown Fantasy League update, and then we'll finish on a couple of DFS lineups I put in today, earlier today, subject to change, but just my initial reactions to it. So we did get the win last week in the Rockdown League.
All right.
Now we didn't score many points. So in fact, 3 of our roster positions got us a total of 7 points. Such was the common story for fantasy this week. But Dicker's field goal sealed it for us last night. We won 116 to 112. So a win is a win. We're currently 4-3. We did drop 1 spot. We're now the number 4 seed, but still in the playoffs. Carried again by Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, and Jordan Love. Now we are going to be without JMO for the next couple of weeks, and so we're going to have to dig into our depth a little bit and probably start someone like a Calvin Ridley or a Noah Fant coming up here in week 8. So we've got a challenge here in the next couple of weeks. I am putting in waiver claims for Jalen McMillan, Cedric Tillman, and Jonnu Smith because we do need some tight end depth here coming into the bye weeks coming in a couple weeks. So we're going to try to get some depth there, and maybe we can get Jalen McMillan or Cedric Tillman and try to stream one of those guys instead of Ridley or Fant.
No, now JMO's not locked or anything on the team, right? I mean,
what do you mean?
You could trade him, could you not?
No trading in the high stakes leagues.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
There's no trading. Yeah.
So now would be a great time to trade him.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to trade him now because his value is going to be suppressed. I would wait till the week he came back if I was going to trade him, but we can't right now do much. We can't really do anything in trades. So we're kind of beholden to the waiver wire with acquisitions.
I forgot it was that kind of a league. Well, hey, let's we're moving forward though. We're 4-3. We're in 4th place. Our 4th seed for the playoffs, and we got a pretty damn good team. So
we do.
I'm excited to see what's next. And with all the injuries, that just helps. Our team have more opportunity. Not wanting players to get injured, of course, but there's a rash of injuries this week. Every week, but this week to the wide receivers. That only helps. The teams that we might have to go up against later. They're going to be without those players. Chris Godwin, that's a huge loss for the season. He was having an epic season, and now it's gone. It's just done.
Yeah, the only injury we've had to deal with right now has been the couple weeks we lost Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence. We had to play Trevor Lawrence. That helped contribute to our slow start out of the gate. But all in all, we've been pretty healthy, luckily, knock on wood. But we do have some depth pieces that we need to step up here in the coming weeks. As far as DFS goes, again, just trying to differentiate between on a GPP lineup, and then just trying to get the best available that you can, more of the surefire plays for cash. So for cash this week, I'm going to roll a lineup with Caleb Williams going against a very poor Washington defense. Coming off a bye week, Devon Achane, Javonte Williams against the Panthers, a couple of studs in A.J. Brown and DJ Moore to pair up with Caleb Williams, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who should have more opportunities if DK Metcalf misses. We talked about Kate Otten. I'm going to double tight end here and also throw out Hunter Henry in the Ravens defense. And so I don't usually go 2 tight ends. But I feel in order to be able to get things like A.J. Brown and some of those guys in the lineup, I had to save some salary in the flex spot. For GPP, which is where we want to get a little bit contrarian, I'm going to go heavy on the Broncos this week. So I'm going to stack up Bo Nix with Troy Franklin, with Javonte Williams, with the Broncos defense, putting them all in there, rolling it out, which allows me to get Devon Achane again, Josh Jacobs against the Jaguars, Jackson Smith-Njigba again against the Bills at home, Cole Kmet for tight end, and then it's not often you get Tyreek Hill for $7,000. So let's put him in there and hope that he and Tua can pick up where they left off. But $7,000 for Tyreek Hill is about as low of a salary as you're going to see, and so he might be highly owned, but so be it. We're going to take advantage of his $7,000 salary.
Makes a lot of sense. Why are you stacking the Denver Broncos so much this week?
They're playing the Panthers.
That's a good enough reason. I forgot about they're playing the Panthers this week.
Now it's tricky though, because if they get a big lead, for instance, it's going to be hard for all these players to eat. So what we really need is a connection or two from Bo Nix to Troy Franklin. And then we're going to need the second half of this game to really be the run game with Javonte Williams, and then the Broncos defense, whether it's Dalton, whether it's Bryce Young, if hopefully Dalton's okay to play. But you got Deontay Johnson trade rumors swirling. They're down offensive linemen. They're down defensive linemen. So it's hard to not put in Javonte Williams. And Javonte Williams can also catch a pass for a touchdown and double dip with Bo Nix. And so I think it's just a combination. Not many people are going to have 3 Broncos, let alone 4. So, but we've got to stand out somewhere. So let's give it a shot.
I love it. I think I'm going to get a little active this week and have some fun with it myself. I still got some free money to use up.
Nice.
So, all right. Well, hey, it has been fun. It has been real. It has been fantasy football tonight. Any final words before we get off for the rest of the evening?
Let's stay healthy, everybody. Stay healthy. We cannot handle any more injuries. So, just sending positive thoughts and best wishes for a healthy, injury-free weekend.
That would be nice. We were talking about that, off air before we started, like how much longer is the NFL going to look this way? And we'll leave you with that thought. With all the injuries, the rash of injuries that we've seen this year, I mean, I think it's an unprecedented amount of IR designations that we've seen so quickly. I mean, even through the first 3-4 weeks of the season, how much longer is the NFL going to stay in this direction?
Yeah, it's just the severity, right?
Yeah.
Dislocated ankles, concussions, like the Hutch injury. Just the severity of these injuries seem to just be the amount of injuries you're like, oh, we can't show that on TV. Either our tolerance is going down or the injuries are getting worse, but it's certainly not a good direction.
It's not. But we'll be back next week, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. for more fantasy football tonight. Hopefully you guys can get a lot of this information from Jared's Twitter at Jared E22. He'll post a lot of the information this week. I try to repost it. But all of the information that he's talking about, all of his final calls for the week will be on his Twitter. I'm not sure which day you do that, but just check out Jared E22 and subscribe or follow whatever it is on Twitter while you're there. Thanks again for watching tonight. We'll see you guys all next week.